Good morning to all of you. We're extremely pleased to actually be out and in person. We have been looking forward to this for many months, and we're disappointed that it hasn't happened before now, but very excited and are grateful to the city for having found a location where we can handle this in person and actually meet the people that we are hoping to serve. I have one request to speak from Lindsay Baker. Ms. Baker from the League of Women Voters, good morning to you.
Good morning, Honorable Chair and Commissioners. I am Lindsay Baker. I'm here representing the Santa Barbara League of Women Voters. I observed and participated in the original Redistricting process, the County of Santa Barbara Districting process, and all of your meetings to date. I appreciate you being here in person. I would just like to emphasize the League supports transparency, diversity, and equity in your process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Any other requests to speak at this time? All right, thank you. Michelle?
Thank you. And so now moving on to the next item will be the approval of prior meeting minutes. That will be for January 20, 2022.
All right, thank you. And there was one set of typos where we had the erroneous date, and we've received the corrected minutes on that. Judge Kahn, any comments you have on the minutes?
No, that was on page 2 with reference to the January 20th, which has been with reference to a prior date. Is it a prior date?
Yes, so you are referring to the meeting minutes that were submitted for January 20th. Those meeting minutes on page 2 stated that at that hearing, certain meeting minutes were approved. The correct date would be the November 8th meeting minutes were approved.
If it requires a formal amendment, thank you. If it requires a formal amendment, then with regard to the proposed minutes that contain any reference to January 20th, let those be stricken, and in their stead, the actual date of the minutes that we were approving, I believe it was November the 8th. Let me turn to the page and make sure that date is correct. Yes, November 8th, 21, so it is so moved.
Sneak this around here a little bit. There we go. Okay. A second to that, to amend that?
I'll second.
Okay. And all in favor? Aye to that? All right. And Judge White, any comments on the minutes?
No comments.
Okay. I did want to just make one comment. I am credited with commenting that the commission's job was to select a plan, not to draft a plan ourselves. I'm quite confident I'm not the one who actually first said that, because I didn't know that, and I learned that more specifically at that meeting. I may have parroted it back, but I'm pretty sure I wasn't the one who originally said it. I did say it eventually, so I just want to give credit to someone else for knowing that. Mr. Colon, I'm pretty sure. All right, with that, any other comments on the minutes? A motion to accept? Second?
Second.
Okay, and I concur, they're approved. All right, Michelle.
Honorable Chair, I'll actually take this item. So there was a request by the commission to talk about forums for future public hearings. So we wanted to leave that option for you to discuss today. Staff recommendation would be to have it in a place or location that is accessible both to the public from a physical standpoint and a technological standpoint, so we can make sure that we can provide all the services that we're providing here today. I would recommend city facilities or city-friendly facilities in that regard, but I'll leave it up to the commission for discussion. I also wanted to make sure that we were clear on dates moving forward, because I believe there was possible conflict with one of the honorable, so we'll leave that item as well. I do have a calendar up with potential places that we already have set up with dates and locations. And with that, I'll leave it up for discussion.
I'm looking at this sideways through bifocals, so I see the March 3rd, which is the next date that we had all anticipated meeting. Is there a location set out that I don't see? Is
So,
there a recommendation on that?
Honorable Chair, we originally had it in the school district location, which is kind of up in the air at this point. So we don't have a location yet. We could use a facility, something similar to the one we're in today, but staff can pivot and be flexible in finding a location for that meeting.
I'm the one with the problem on March 9th. I'm going to be in Washington, D.C., so I'm terribly, terribly sorry that I'm unavailable on that date. I don't know what can be done to reschedule it or have me appear virtually.
Is that possible, a virtual appearance?
Honorable Chair, it's up to the commission. We're trying to promote it in person, but whatever's, it's at your discretion.
Actually, I was saying just a virtual appearance for Judge White, and the rest, and Judge Khan and I would be here, so.
I believe we could handle that, yes.
Okay. And then March 3rd, did I gather from your remarks that the school is still a possibility? It hasn't been completely foreclosed, or is that really unrealistic?
I just can't answer that for you today. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. So I think we all have the dates in mind, the 10th, the 14th, the 30th, and then April 12th, which would be would that be at City Hall?
That would be a city hall
Okay.
location, correct. That would be
All right.
council chambers.
All right. I like this place very much. I think you did a wonderful job finding this. So, Judge Khan, any comments on this? Okay. Just let us know where to be, and we'll be there.
Honorable Chair, I just do want to run, though, the 30th will most likely be an all-day meeting, so it'll be a long day for you on that
I'm
day.
sorry, which one?
Wednesday, March 30th?
March 30th. I think we're planning on that, yes. Okay.
Okay, so I apologize, Honorable Chair. So are these moving forward? Are these dates good? And are we?
I think the only conflict we had with the date was Commissioner White on March 9th, and if we can arrange for her somehow to appear by Zoom, we can be in person, and that would be fine.
Okay.
We don't want to change them if we don't absolutely have to.
And what we can do too is bring this back next meeting with a more finalized schedule and make sure that we have everything up and everything is clear. Okay, staff will go ahead and do that next.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you. And Honorable Chair, we would like to move on to item 2. It's a presentation by both city staff regarding the community input that we have received, if that's okay.
Go right ahead.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So at our last public hearing, we received community input, in particular from Judge Ochoa, in representation of the Banales plaintiffs, letting us know that they have requested that we include more information about the Banales stipulated judgment as part of the settlement agreement in our discussions of the redistricting goals and rules and principles. And so here we have a slide that breaks down certain language from the stipulated judgment in that case for your consideration. The language reads that the intent of the parties is the electoral district map shall include 2 electoral districts in which Latino eligible voters constitute a majority of the eligible voters according to the most recently available relevant estimates from the Census Bureau American Community Survey, tailored to the greatest extent possible in a manner consistent with federal and state law so as to address any issue of vote dilution. Next slide, please. So overall, we have received various different public comments and community input, and we would like to summarize that again for you as we consider further draft maps today. First of all and foremost, the creation of 2 Latino-Latina majority-minority districts has been presented by several individuals, including Judge Ochoa, on behalf of the Vanales plaintiffs. In addition to that, we have also heard from the community that every district should include a portion of State Street, as well as that as many districts as possible should include a portion of the coastal zone. That would include the waterfront, that would include the harbor, as well as that each redistricting district should include commercial areas, not just residential ones. And also that there should be minimal changes to preserve existing communities and boundaries. So we urge you to consider the community input that we have received thus far, and we welcome further public comment and further community input to guide your decisions.
Could I ask a question? These were the factors that were discussed during the last redistricting after the Vanales settlement. Have there been ongoing comments from the community that reiterate these in the last several months since we've been having this panel meeting?
Yes, and in
Okay.
fact, the commission received letters from several community stakeholders regarding these different issues of importance, and those letters are also available on the redistricting website for all the public to view, and they are available physically should any member of the public request to see them. Next slide, please. And with that, I would like to turn over item 3, the presentation on further draft maps by our demographer, National Demographics Corporation, Dr. Daniel Phillips.
Thank you. Good to be with you in person, honorable commissioners. And today we have a presentation of draft maps, and what you'll see in this presentation are actually slightly revised versions of the plans that were presented to you last meeting, and I will discuss the revisions that were made to each of these, but you will see that there's a little R suffix after each plan number to indicate that it's a revised version of the originally presented plan. But before I get into the plans, I do want to discuss again the criteria that go into drawing these districts. We have criteria that come from federal law, state law, and then there are criteria that are not requirements but that are often traditionally considered. So under federal law, we have the stipulation that the districts be equal in population. And this means all people, so including those who are children, non-citizens, all people counted by the census. Second is to be mindful of the Federal Voting Rights Act and not do anything that would dilute the voting influence of a protected class group of people. But on the flip side, not practicing what is called racial gerrymandering, where you make race or ethnicity the only or main consideration when drawing district boundaries. Under state law, there is a list of criteria, and it's actually in a rank order. You'll see the numbering here, which means that if you, ideally you'd want to follow all of these, but if it's not possible to follow all of these, you would want to prefer the ones that are higher up in the list. So the number 1 criterion is to have districts that are contiguous, just one piece each. Number 2 is to avoid dividing neighborhoods and what are called communities of interest, which are socioeconomic geographic areas that should be kept together. Third is to have district boundaries that are easily identifiable, that follow major roads, highways, creeks, railroads, etc. And fourth is to draw districts that are compact, in that they do not bypass one group of people to get to a more distant group of people. Finally, there is this prohibition against favoring or discriminating against a political party. So the idea here is for this to be a totally nonpartisan process. Under heading 3, other traditional redistricting principles, things you may want to consider include minimizing voters shifted to different election years, respecting voters' choices, or continuity in office, future population growth, accounting for that, and preserving the core of existing districts. So all of these are optional things that you may consider, so long as it is not at the expense of the federal and state criteria. Now, in addition, we have the language from the Benalla settlement that Michelle already went over. Now, in regards to neighborhoods and communities of interest, I want to point out that the city actually has an official list of neighborhoods with officially identified boundaries. Now, whether these boundaries actually cohere with everyone's perceptions of their neighborhoods, there may be some differences, but this is the best data we have for the city's neighborhood definitions. We also have potential communities of interest that include areas like the Central Business District, historic districts, school attendance areas, fire hazard zones, zip code areas, land use and zoning areas, and concentrations of various socioeconomic interests. So it's ultimately we would like to hear from members of the public about whether any of these are indeed communities of interest as they would define it. And really what we want to hear is, would these areas benefit from being kept together in one district rather than being split apart? Some of these may actually be better represented by having multiple representatives on the council. So these are just potential ideas. It's ultimately up to members of the public to tell us what the communities of interest are. Like, should downtown be kept in just one district, or is it better split up to have multiple representatives? This map shows the current district plan, and you'll see that there are 6 districts, and you have District 1 on the east side, District 2 on the Mesa, District 3 on the west side, District 4 in the hills, District 5 along Upper State, and District 6 downtown. And so there's also a piece of the Santa Barbara Airport is also in the city, but for space purposes, it's not on this map, but you can see it's in District 5 as well. Now, there are a few key statistics that you'll see at the bottom right corner of each of these maps. And of course, these are not the only demographics that we've made available. We have on the website whole demographics tables for each of the plans, but these are kind of the 3 that are really going to determine a lot in this process. So the very first is called total population deviation, and that is the difference between the most populated district and the least populated district divided by the ideal population. And so for the current plan, we see it's just above 20%. And in order for the districts to be considered presumptively constitutional when it comes to equal population, we would want this number to be under 10%. So as the current plan stands, it is not population balanced, and something would have to change. You see that we also have statistics for District 1 and District 3, the percentage of the CVAP, or citizen voting age population, that is Latino or Latina. That number is 49% in District 1 and 45% in District 3. So like I said, the current plan is not considered population balanced because of that total deviation is 20 rather than under 10. And I mentioned the CVAP numbers for District 1 and District 3. We have all 6 districts are contiguous, and When it comes to neighborhoods and communities of interest, I use the city's definition for neighborhoods to look at ones that might be considered more substantially split, and that would be these 4 neighborhoods: Laguna, West Downtown, Lower State, and West Side. And but communities of interest, like I said, that this is emphasis on the potential here, because they may in fact not be legally communities of interest, in that they should be kept together in one district. And so there are some other criteria here, like easily identifiable boundaries and compactness. And but the main point about the current plan is that it's not population balanced. So in order to come up with ideas for how to proceed, knowing that we can't adopt the current plan, is we've presented 3 options that we call plans 101, 102, and 103. Each of these has the R suffix because they've been slightly revised from the ones that were originally presented, and I'll explain what was revised. But 101 you might call, or 101R, you might call the minimal change plan, in that it has the least amount of change from the current plan, the one that was adopted in 2015. The one slight revision that was made to the original 101 is that District 1 now has a majority that is a majority of its citizen voting age population that is Latino, at just over 50%. So the boundary between Districts 1 and 4 is changed so that one can have a majority Latino CVAP. This little area here was originally in 1, and now it's in 4. Can you see my cursor on the map? No. District 3 expands southward towards West Beach for purposes of equal population, at the expense of District 2, which under the current plan includes the harbor and goes up to State Street. Districts 5 and 6 are essentially unchanged from the current plan. So the thing about this plan is it gives every district a piece of the coast except for District 6, which is landlocked. And it gives every district a piece of State Street except for District 2, which is cut off from State Street by District 3, because District 3 has to grow because it's the most underpopulated district under the current plan. So it's just a matter of where does District 3 grow? And under this proposal, it expands to West Beach and the harbor area. So some key features of this minimal change plan, 101R. You might say that the Laguna neighborhood is significantly split, as well as West Downtown, Lower State, and West Side neighborhood. There's a lot of the West Side that ends up in District 2. And it does split the Central Business District, the Historic District, which includes both the downtown and waterfront areas, and what I'm calling Greater San Roque. That's just combining San Roque and East San Roque into one combined area, but again, we don't know if these are just potential communities of interest that might exist. The boundaries tend to follow those of neighborhoods or major roads, and all districts are reasonably compact. And the key thing to note is that, like I said, District 1 has a majority of its citizen voting age population that is Latino. District 3 has 41%. With Plan 102, this you might call the moderate change plan. And under this plan, District 1 shifts east away from State Street, taking in more of the Laguna neighborhood. District 3 shifts west away from State Street so that it is completely west of the freeway and covers the whole west side and lower west neighborhoods. District 2 shifts east so that it covers the whole waterfront area. And District 6 shifts south so that it covers the whole central business district. Districts 4 and 5 are essentially unchanged. And so the one difference between 102R and the original 102 is that Coast Village is now in District 4 because there was some public testimony that there should be another commercial area in District 4. So that was moved back to 4. So this has a total population deviation of 8%. 51% of the eligible voters in District 1 are Latino, and 40% in District 3. There are the neighborhoods of Laguna and Lower State are the only ones that are really significantly split. West Downtown and the West Side are united under this plan. So the whole central business district and waterfront areas are united. But you might argue whether or not District 2 is compact. But that is the last in the priority of criteria from the state criteria. So now we turn to what might be called the Significant Changes Plan, 103R. And so with this plan, I say significant change, but it's all kind of relative because while it is more significant than the other plans, still the core of each district remains the same. East Side, Downtown, West Side, Mesa, Riviera, Upper State. So District 1 shifts east away from State Street, taking in almost all of the Laguna neighborhood. District 3 shifts west, like it did in the previous plan. It's very much limited to the west side and lower west. District 2 shifts west to take in all of southwestern Santa Barbara, including the Hidden Valley and Campanile neighborhoods. So it gets all of those coastal hills. District 5 shifts east so that it takes in all of northwestern Santa Barbara, so that the two San Roque neighborhoods are united. District 4 shifts west so that it takes in the area north of Mission Street. And District 6 shifts south to gain the waterfront. So you kind of combine those tourist-serving commercial areas that are in downtown and along the waterfront. The one difference between the original 103 and 103R is that District 1 was slightly tweaked so that you can get a majority Latino CVAP, just over 50%, while District 3 is at 40. And it's a higher population deviation, just under 10%. So this plan, you might say, does the best job of uniting neighborhoods. Laguna, West Downtown, Lower State, West Side, they're all united. It does split Oak Park in Upper East, but it follows major streets to do so, namely Mission Street and Garden Street. It unites the Central Business District, Harbor District, Waterfront, and San Roque, plus the hilly areas west of the freeway. It does, though, split what you might call the high fire risk area along the foothills. So it does tend to follow boundaries of neighborhoods or major roads. You might argue of whether District 6 is compact or not. So when going through all these plans, the thing that stands out is that District 3's Latino citizen voting age population is on the lower side, just around 40%. So to try to see if we could meet the intent of the Benalis stipulation, we decided to experiment by drawing what's called a test plan to see if it was indeed possible to get a District 3 Latino CVAP of 50%. And so this is the result of that effort. And what you have here is that District 1 shifts east. District 1 really didn't have to change too much to get to what's now 51%. It's District 3 that really changes. It expands out from the west side to take in pieces of Oak Park, downtown, West Downtown, Lower State, West Beach, and Alta Mesa. And so because of this, District 6, the yellow district, has to cut around in a very, very thin slice to reach into Bel Air to get enough population in that district. While District 2, the blue district, has to cut around District 3, again, a very narrow connection here to reach into East Beach. Districts 4 and 5 are mostly unchanged. So this test plan is using NDC Plan 102R as a base and works off of that to achieve LCVAP majorities in District 1 and District 3. So you get just barely over 50% in District 3, and your total population deviation is under 10%. So while we do have the majority of the citizen voting age population being Latino in Districts 1 and 3, and the districts are within the threshold of equal population, the districts are contiguous, but just barely so in some cases. Even here, it almost looks like it's only what's called a point contiguity, but it just barely is not. So that all being said, the district boundaries do not respect the geographic integrity of neighborhoods, nor are they easily identifiable because they jig-jag around. And you also have very non-compact districts. One is compact, but 3 definitely is not, and because of that, it makes 6 and 2 not compact as well. And so I'm just going to skip ahead to this slide. What we did for the test plan is use what's called a heat map. And it looks like this, where we basically looked at where Latinos are concentrated, and you can see here what the colors indicate. The warmer colors are the higher percentages, and we basically just tried to get as many of the higher percentage blocks as we could to get to that Latino majority in District 3. And so this would be an example of the main or even only reason of including census blocks in that District 3 would be the percentage of Latino or Latina voters, which would be an example of racial gerrymandering. And like I said, it has issues with compactness that result. But just so you know, under the current district map, Latino and Latina constituents have been able to elect their representatives of choice, including Latino and Latina council members. So given what we found with the test plan, we wanted to see if, okay, it's not possible to get a majority in District 3, that is Latino, without racial gerrymandering, but can we get anywhere close? And so Plan 104 would be the result of that effort, where we wouldn't say this is a racial gerrymander because we're not, while we do look at where Latinos are concentrated, we're not making that only our main consideration. We're taking into account neighborhoods and compactness and factors like that. So under this plan, District 1 shifts east away from State Street, taking in more of the Laguna neighborhood. District 3 shifts a little more east into Lower State and gets part of downtown as well for equal population, as well as north to reach into Bel Air, again, to get the right number of people to be equal population. So District 6 does have to cross the freeway to gain the area between Modoc and the freeway to get the equal population numbers. And District 2 has to shift into East Beach to pick up the right number of people as well. Districts 4 and 5 are essentially unchanged. So you'll see that we have a population deviation under 8%. We get 51% in District 1 and 45% in District 3, which is at least not any lower than what's under the current plan. And like I said, we can't stick with the current plan because District 3 is underpopulated under the current plan. So there are, you can see here how the heat map compares with the district boundaries under Plan 104. But like I said, we didn't use the heat map as our primary consideration. It was a consideration. So there are a few neighborhood splits like Laguna, West Downtown, Lower State, and West Side. And there are some splits of what could be considered communities of interest, but may not be. However, the waterfront area is united in District 2. They tend to follow boundaries of neighborhoods or major roads. You may argue whether Districts 2 and 3 are compact. So I showed you that already. So this is my final slide. I'm happy to take your questions about the proposed redistricting plans and maybe hear about which plan you might prefer or maybe want to see revisions to. And we do have an interactive review map where each of these plans is posted where you can zoom in and see the boundaries in detail. So thank you for your attention.
Honorable Commissioners, I also want to let you know that it is up to you whether you would like to open up public comment to discuss these maps first, or whether you would like to deliberate and discuss first.
My vote would be to have the public comment first. Does that make sense? We'd much rather hear from you than you from us at this point. The first person who's requested to speak is Lee Heller. Good morning, and thank you very much for being here.
Chair and Commissioners and Dr. Phillips, to see you in person. I spent 14 months as a regular virtual attendee at the County Redistricting Commission, so it's nice to be here in person, and thank you for all your work on this. I've just gotten these maps, so I haven't had time to review them carefully, but I think one of the things I want to say is I understand the public imagination that somehow every district needs to have State Street and or the waterfront in it, but there are 2 council members here who are not currently attached to State Street, but who still fight passionately for issues associated with it. Councilmember Sneddon, my own Councilmember Jordan. You don't have to have a section of the city in your district to care about it and advocate for it. I think what's more important is that we retain communities of interest, particularly under Benalis, while avoiding the worst gerrymandering possible. Right now, map 104 looks like the best option. I need to go home and look at them more carefully, but from what I can see, we're gonna have to balance these competing requirements under the Voting Rights Act, and those should really supervene over whether or not Councilmember Sneddon has a piece of State Street in her district, or Councilmember Jordan doesn't have all of the waterfront. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Lanny Eberstein. Is it Eberstein or Eberstein? Ebenstein. I got it backwards each way. Thank you. And I know that you have appeared on this panel before, so thank you for being here.
Thank you. Two things. My name is Lanny Ebenstein, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Santa Barbara District Elections Committee, and making some comments on their behalf. That includes Judge Ochoa and Jacqueline Inda, who were unable to be here today. I should say, too, I'm a longtime friend of Frank Benalis, and in fact was talking to him on the phone this morning. Although his thoughts are not incorporated into these comments I'm making, we were talking on something else. We really appreciate the role of the City of Santa Barbara and of City Attorney Ariel Colon in trying to ensure that discussion of the CVRA requirements, but also of the Benalis stipulation, are included in your deliberations. So I want to say we really appreciate that. We know these are difficult issues. And I want to say, too, we really appreciate NDC, too, in terms of they're an outstanding firm. So the city is fortunate that they are doing this work. As the previous speaker, our inclination would be that something along the lines of NDC Plan 104 is probably the closest at this point in time. We agree, based on our review of the data to this point, that it would be hard to get to a majority Latino CVAP district in District 3 as a result of changes in neighborhood demography. And but we have a couple suggestions that we've had some preliminary discussion with the city about, but that want to bring to your attention as well. One is that we think that there would be merit to considering the line on District 3 to be Castillo Street for parts of the area rather than Highway 101. We think that there is a neighborhood community of interest between the blocks that are on either side of Highway 101, and that that would not be splitting neighborhoods any more than other proposals have done. We think that if you did that then some of the Bel Air area could be moved elsewhere. We recognize that once you start to move one part of a district, you affect others, but we do think that's something that could assist with demographic issues. As well, we're feeling that if you can't get to a majority Latino CVAP district in District 3, that the next best would be to try to get to a Latino plurality district. And we think that that would be the closest to the spirit. If for demographic reasons that it's not possible to get to majority, the next step would be plurality and then a protected class majority district. And we do think that Plan 104, properly tailored, might be able to achieve both of those goals. Briefly, just to make comments on some of the others, there's a number of options on District 1 that seem to create a 51% Latino CVAP district, so we would encourage you to consider one of those options. We know that there are issues with respect to having a number of districts have waterfront areas. It might be possible to have some of District 4 included in the East Beach area. That is something that might be something to consider. Thank you for your time and effort, and this is a very important decision to Santa Barbara. Again, if there's any way that we can be of assistance, please let us know. We appreciate that the city is looking carefully at both the CVRA and the Benalis issues. Thank you for your time.
Can I ask you a question for clarification?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, when you mentioned Plan 101, are you referring to 101R? That was the subject of this presentation?
I'm sorry, I thought I said 104 in
Well, you
terms of,
did.
it seems like something along the lines of if I misspoke, I didn't mean to.
You did, you said 104, but
Oh.
then later you referenced Plan 101, and I just want to clarify, are you referring to Plan 101 that was previously the subject of a presentation at our prior hearing, or the current Plan 101, which is designated with an R?
Yeah, no, I misspoke, I meant to say 104.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Great.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Ebenstein. And the next requested speaker is Kristin Sneddon.
Thank you. Hello. Can you hear me?
Does that move down? Can you move that down any?
Mr. Ebenstein's quite a bit taller than I am. Okay. Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you. Kristin Sneddon. I'm the current representative of District 4.
Actually, we're having a little hard time hearing you.
I'm the current representative of District 4.
Thank you.
And wasn't planning on speaking today, but did want to speak to a previous public speaker who mentioned my name. And I want to emphasize that we're new to districts, and we have representation of a lot of diversity. And I think and I'm termed out after this, so this wouldn't affect any of my future elections. But I think it would be in the interest to keep it as close as possible to what the current districts are, because we've spent now 2 election cycles really getting to know our constituents, the voters, who lives in the neighborhoods, knocking door to door, and we've just started a 5-year term to get back on cycle, and so we would then be in a position of representing districts where we had not spent as much time meeting door to door, talking to people, and understanding the needs of a particular district. And then to speak to the high fire zone, I live in the high fire zone, and if the majority of my district was not also high fire, then I would need to recuse myself from voting on high fire issues. But because the whole district is majority high fire, it's not a conflict, and I'm representing the district as a whole. So when you break up the high fire, as some of these maps suggest, I worry that the high fire residents would not have as much of representation, even though it seems like they would, but others would be also possibly needing to recuse themselves. And again, I apologize, I wasn't planning on speaking on that. And then as to the waterfront, I believe we all protect the waterfront, but in terms of the businesses, Coast Village Road, waterfront businesses, downtown, I believe if those all 3 were in one district, that would be too much concentration of one, not one council member, but a dilution of the business interest votes for those areas representation. So Coast Village Road, waterfront as a business area, and State Street, I think the way they are now work well. So I would say that from the least changes, 101 are just to let district representatives continue to represent the districts that they've really gotten to know recently. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Millie Jordan? I'm sorry, Mike Jordan. So there is someone whose handwriting is as difficult as mine. I'm glad to see that.
It's my more attractive sister. So I'm Mike Jordan. I'm the District 2 council member, and just have a couple points. I, like Kristin, I have no fear of any map you could possibly conceivably come up with being moved outside my district. I'm kind of right there in the center where the horizontal line and the vertical line in the center meet, so I can't see how you could ever get there. So my comments don't have anything to do with me. I'm interested really in a process that more respects the prior work done with the established districts, recognizing that the work has already been done to create geographic neighborhoods that are also voting communities unto themselves. Up until today, and I've seen, say, 104 or any other choices, it seemed to me more like an art project to see how inventive you could be. But I think we should start with what we had before, make adjustments to the existing edges, and work hard to avoid what you're calling major, or shifting, but certainly major shifting. I also think one of the goals should be to continue the representation of State Street across all the district elected. Right now, all 6 district elected, not the mayor, but the 6, all touch State Street. And that also goes to the point of, I think 104, Mike Jordan doesn't want the entire coastline in his district either. I think for the same reasons that Kristin mentioned, that that deserves to be touched by multiple council members. And then, I'm not an expert, I'll give you that caveat. I'm the least capable of knowing anything regarding this, but the counsel that I've gotten is that we should be recognizing the Bonales decision as an intent, not a requirement. And that intent, in my opinion at least, is that it's equally important to maintaining the geographic integrity of what we already have. Since today's the first time I've seen 104, just a couple comments. District 1 on the east side, I think you should find a way to my point about State Street, and it should claw back those 3 blocks to get back to State Street, to have a point of State Street. And then District 3 has a carve out there right to the left of the number 3 that is clearly on the west side. And in this particular case, if you haven't actually driven around town, roughly bordering that kind of horizontal line between the blue and the green is a large hill. And the existing map has District 2 rolling over that hill and actually going down into the flatlands of the west side. And I think that would be one remedy I'd like to see, is growth on District 3 to the southwest that would clearly take in all of the west side as you run up against the hill that separates it from District 2. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Any other requests for public comment at this time? All right. Any comments or questions by the panel? And I'll start with Commissioner White.
I find it interesting that we have those who are in favor of 104 and those who are in favor of the plan that closely reflects the existing plan. And I think there's a bit of perhaps a tension, and we could address it. I don't know particularly how we would, and I kind of lean towards NDC to help us in that regard, but there does seem to be a bit of a conflict there.
Let me turn to Commissioner Khan. Any comments you want to make before we ask our experts to comment?
I mean, my views probably need to be as also tempered by whatever continued discussion the city attorney has had with the judge and with the Bonales plaintiffs, because a lot turns on what was really intended by this settlement in terms of attempting to achieve the majority districts, and we're talking mainly about District 3, because I don't think it's such a problem for District 1, and also complying with all of the laws that pertain to our going through this process and reviewing these maps. So, in order to make an intelligent decision, I think also getting input with the progress that the city attorney has had with those plaintiffs in conjunction with proposed maps might be beneficial, because we don't want to create a situation where there's continued litigation and there's no finality, if there can be, by getting everyone on board that if we cannot achieve majority districts in both those districts, that hearing at least some degree of concession by the Bonales plaintiffs would be beneficial.
I'm going to ask Mr. Colon to make remarks.
Good morning, honorable commissioners. Commissioner Khan, we did have conversations with Judge Ochoa. Dr. Evenstein accurately reflected those conversations. My suggestion for today is you've heard commentary on 101 and 104R. If you have further direction to our demographer as to those maps, that might move your discussion along. And of course, any other questions.
I think what I'm hearing, with regard to some of the areas that are important for inclusion in each of the districts, but I think what I'm hearing is that this Plan 104, in conjunction with the original map that was agreed upon as a result of, similar public meetings, are probably somewhere between the happy point, or at least achieving some kind of balance that might be acceptable to the community, and then that could be the subject of further discussions with Judge Ochoa and the Bonales plaintiffs. So that would be my perspective at this point. And so as far as NDC is concerned, perhaps they can look at those two maps and see if they can, together with the public comments that have been made, see if they can, adjust the boundaries in such a way as maintains as much of the balance as both of those have with regard to Latino voting districts and with regard to compactness and, population deviation and all the other criteria that they feel is important.
One of the suggestions was to consider the line on District 3 to be Castillo Street instead of 101. I don't know what impact that would have, but perhaps we could look at it.
The only thought I have is I'm going to reiterate Judge White's comments that there are criteria which are, well, not incompatible in tension one with the other, and the emphasis will wind up having to be more on one than on the other to some degree, and we hope slightly, but to some degree. I'm sure more public comment will assist in that. I'm going to ask Dr. Phillips if you want to comment on the Cabrillo Street, if you have any comment on that. And I'm also going to ask a question, and I appreciate our Brown Act limitations. While all of us have some knowledge of the city of Santa Barbara, all the commissioners, and I probably the most because I come up here to work a great deal, a drive around town couldn't hurt, couldn't hurt us. And a drive in which no editorial remarks are made, no comments are made, but just say, here's the existing layout of our districts as we are now operating and from which we're going to have to deviate for a number of reasons, including just the population. And here's who they are. I think us seeing that could help me a lot. Mr. Colon?
Thank you, Chair Johnson. We can arrange that. I'd add a suggestion that would make it easier from a Brown Act standpoint, and that is that your visit be a bit of a shuttle trip, so we would have stopping points along the way where the public could join you.
I'm up for anything, but I've always found that a site visit is much better than looking at maps and hearing what people tell me. Even though I believe them, I don't internalize it in the same way.
I agree. When it was mentioned that there's a mountain and you would essentially not have geographic integrity, that struck a chord.
Dr. Phillips, do you want to make any comments on what you've heard today? Or are you prepared to? I don't want to put you on the spot because I'd asked you to make quick remarks, but.
So you asked about making, it's funny, in this town there are 3 streets that sound very similar. I believe Castillo Street was what you're referring to. Making that the boundary between Districts 3 and 6 I looked at that possibility, and it doesn't change the Latino CVAP numbers in District 3 it's still 45%. So I would suggest keeping the freeway as a more easily identifiable boundary between those two districts.
Any other public comment? Yes, sir. Could you state your full name for us, please?
Yes, good morning. I'm a City Council member, Oscar Gutierrez. I represent District 3. I have lived in District 3 my entire life, all 38 years, so, you know, I know it fairly well. And obviously, some of the statements that that the previous public speakers, I agree with. So I won't reiterate them, but I'm still trying to figure out what would be best for my district. Because one thing I can tell you from growing up in the district is that we've always been told that we live on the other side of the tracks, that we're from the other side of the tracks, because literally we are, right? Even according to some of these maps. So some of the suggestions that Dr. Ebenstein gave make sense of kind of, you know, allowing it to go to the other side of the map, or the other side of the tracks, allowing the coastline and obviously State Street as well, I think just falls under the whole equitable mindset. But I also understand that, you know, there's certain boxes we have to check, and I just want to say that even though the data that was collected during the census don't show that there are as many Latino people in our district, you know, obviously you're all aware that some of our residents, or a lot of our residents, aren't, they're not registered citizens. So they're there, they just couldn't. Or a large percentage of them are children. So they weren't really necessarily counted as accurately as you would, or as we would have liked. But the population's there, so I don't really know how that affects the way the lines are drawn. But ultimately, you know, we all represent the city, all selected officials. I respond to people in my colleagues' districts all the time, and so do they. You know, so you all have a very difficult job, but I still am trying to meet with my residents to get their opinion about this and how this will affect their lives. But I just wanted to kind of like let you all know of my presence and that my residents are concerned about this, and I'm trying to do my best to understand it so I can explain it to them. But yeah, just being a little more equitable as to where my district lines fall is definitely something I would appreciate your attention to. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gutierrez. That was very helpful. And yes, Ms. Baker.
Honorable Chair, I would like to emphasize what Councilman Gutierrez said about the councilman's representing the entire city. And I would like to re-emphasize something that I previously said to you, that Kristin Sneddon, councilperson, previously was recused from voting on ADUs, accessory dwelling units, in the high fire district because she lived there. So we wouldn't want that to happen. Again, thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? All right, thank you. These were very helpful. The difference between having you all here and us being on Zoom plays out. We see it very strongly. Judge Kahn, anything else from you? Judge White?
No, thank you. Thank you. And so with that being said, our last item, item 4, is a discussion of future agendas. If there's anything in particular that you would like either the city or NDC to follow up on, please feel free to let us know. Oh, in addition to that, the site visits that we discussed, we're also happy to take a look at your schedules and coordinate what would be most convenient for you all.
I know that our next meeting is March 3rd, so we do have some time. I don't not know what the other commissioners' schedules look like or what the city would be able to put together, particularly if it's going to involve more than us just driving around and us really having a whistle stop, which is an excellent idea. But I would really like to have that happen as soon as we can possibly arrange it, because I think that will give us a lot of suggestions for what we would like our experts to respond to us with. We've heard today the tension between the including major components of the city in multiple districts versus retaining the familiarity of the districts that were worked on very, very hard several years ago and which people have learned to live with and feel have been successful, and the Benales case and other things. So those tensions, I think, we're going to ask some specific questions, but I, for one, will like to see the city before I start posing them. So.
I would agree, and to the extent that we could incorporate that on March 3rd, I've just looked at my schedule, I'd be available to come up earlier so that we could do a site visit. I don't know if the other commissioners are equally available on that day.
Yes, I am, so we can check that. That might be a very good way to do it. Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. So to summarize, it sounds like all the commissioners would be available on March 3rd for a site visit. We can take a look to see if we can have that earlier in the day rather than later in the evening, and we will circle back with you on that. Are there any other items that you would like to discuss for future agendas or anything else that we can follow up on? Thank you. Chair Johnson, you may seek to adjourn the meeting.
Well, I will for the third or fourth time. Thank you all for attending here. This was very important to us as it is to you, and we're very happy to see you in person. And we'll be here for a few moments, I think, to say hello in person as well. Motion to adjourn? Second? Second. Thank you. We'll meet again on March 3rd.